The story begins on a dark night, with a view of a stately home through shadowy leaves rustle. Inside, a blonde woman in a pink dress packs a trunk, anxiously wondering if she's forgotten anything. Looking over her shoulder with grim determination, she reminds herself she must run away before the Emperor arrives tomorrow. A horrifying vision flashes before her, a pristine white dress, splattered with blood, foretelling a terrible death. Shuddering with fear, she clenches her jaw, vowing that she doesn't want to die and will live. Gripping a small pouch tightly, she reaffirms her promise to herself. She will survive, no matter what. She pulls out a blue, patterned handkerchief, her expression somber as she looks at it. A memory surfaces of a man's hand giving her the handkerchief, promising he would return. The memory continues, showing their hands clasped together tenderly amidst a field of white flowers. Back in the present, she thinks of her knight, the one who would always come to save her when she was in danger. In the radiant memory, the red-haired knight kneels before her, taking her hand in his. Her expression saddens as she concludes he must have forgotten his promise since he never came, deciding it's no use holding on in time to leave. Knock knock. A sudden sound at the door startles her from her thoughts. Her vibrant green eye widens in shock. The red-haired knight stands in her doorway, offering a sincere apology for being late. He smiles warmly, calling her name Lady Idalise, and her own face lights up with joy and relief. The scene shifts, flashing back to a quiet day spent reading in the study. This peaceful routine was broken when she discovered a mysterious, glowing book on the shelf. Holding the ornate red and gold book, she questions if she's always owned one, titled The Fate of the Flower. Whoosh! The book flies open with a magical burst of light. Strange script writhes across the page, as a desperate voice cries out, "Your Majesty!" The book shows a terrible vision. The Emperor stands with a bloody sword over Idalise's body, as a voice demands to know what he's done. In the vision, the Emperor scoffs, dismissing the title of Empress, and accusing Idalise Brill of terrible crimes as she lies dying. As the Emperor declares who his new Empress will be, the vision's version of Idalise looks up in absolute terror. Thump thump. Back in reality, Idalise clutches her chest in panic, realizing the woman being stabbed in the vision was her. With a thud, the ominous book falls onto the table. Stumbling backward, she wonders who created such a horrible book that plays out such vivid, terrifying scenes. The closed book lies innocently on an ornate tablecloth. A wave of fear washes over her, as she wonders if the book is some kind of prophecy of her death. She tries to dismiss it, but the vision feels far too serious to be laughed off as a mere joke. Overwhelmed, she collapses to the floor, just as her maid rushes in, crying out, "My lady!" The maid, Anne, worriedly asks if she is all right, noting her pale face. Idalise urgently tells Anne to look at the book. Frantically holding the book open for Anne to see, she asks if she's ever seen such terrifying and strange magic before. A confused Anne asks what she is talking about, leaving Idalise bewildered. Anne gently explains that the book is just blank paper with nothing written on it. Idalise is left speechless and horrified by the revelation. After studying the book, The Fate of the Flower, for a few days, Idalise sits at her desk, deep in thought. She confirms her first discovery by showing the book to her staff. Only she can see what's inside, as it just looks like empty pages to them. Her second finding is that the book's origin is a complete unknown, having mysteriously appeared on her bookshelf with no record of its purchase. A tiny, frustrated version of Idalise shakes the book, finding the entire situation deeply suspicious. She realizes that every time the book glows, new text appears on its pages. Shielding her eyes from a brilliant light only she can see, she wonders if the book is revealing the story bit by bit. The book presents a formal profile of Idalise Brill, daughter of a count destined to become empress. She discovers it even contains a character list, just like a novel, though much of the text is still frustratingly blurred. She concludes that the book is telling her a story through visions and words that no one else can perceive. The book reveals her terrible fate. She will be consumed by jealousy, commit evil acts, and ultimately be slain. Idalise scowls, stating she dislikes this story, as she has never even met the Emperor. She dismisses the prophecy of being stabbed to death as complete nonsense. With a huff, a chibi version of herself decides it would be utterly foolish to believe any of it. The small, blonde girl sits at her desk with a pout, thinking that ignoring the problem doesn't feel right. Now overwhelmed, the blonde woman rests her head in her hand, staring stressfully at the document before her. Suddenly, her eyes widen in startled realization as an idea strikes her. A brilliant golden light erupts from the pages of the open book on her desk. The light reveals a worn portrait of a red-haired man in a uniform, his face obscured by shadow. The blonde woman stares at the book in shock, wondering if she's discovered a new character. Standing and reading, she learns of a character named Rihan, who is kidnapped and forced to fight as a gladiator. The text confirms the man in the portrait is Rihan, a gladiator with red hair and golden eyes who lost his memory. Resolved, she calls out for her maid, Anne, telling her to prepare for an outing. Cloaked and determined, the blonde woman declares her intention to find Rihan. A carriage drawn by 4 horses travels briskly down a dusty road. Arriving in a dark, ominous forest, her maid, Anne, nervously questions why her lady has come to such a cruel place. The blonde woman smiles slyly, thinking that if the character Rihan truly exists, then the book she read was not fiction. A well-dressed man welcomes them to the arena, and the cloaked woman asks if he is the guide. The 4-horse carriage continues its journey down the remote path. Inside the building, she cautiously inquires about a gladiator with red hair and golden eyes. The guide smiles, informing her that she's lucky the man's match is about to begin. An announcer's voice echoes across a vast arena, pitting Jacques the White against Rihan the Red. The blonde woman flinches in shock, wondering if the Rihan announced is the one she's been searching for. As the gladiators clash, the guide politely shows her to a seat overlooking the fight. She watches with apprehension, reminding herself that it could just be someone with the same name. Her view is obscured by the fighter's helmet, preventing her from seeing his hair color. A close-up reveals the gladiator's piercing golden eye, and the woman's own eyes widen in stunned silence. The fight concludes brutally as the victor laughs over Rihan's defeated, bleeding form, held by his opponent. The bloodied Rihan glares up through his helmet, cursing his defeat. He is thrown violently across the sand, crying out in despair. The blonde woman watches from the stands, her face a mask of pure horror. In a shocking turn, both fighters simultaneously run each other through with their swords. The crowd murmurs in confusion as the guide looks on, trying to discern what happened. Distraught, the woman questions why the crowd only cares about who won, not about the fallen fighters. She stands in disgust, realizing that in this cruel place, no one cares that someone has just died. An announcer's voice suddenly roars that Rihan is alive as he stirs on the arena floor. The brutal moment of the double impalement flashes again, emphasizing the fight's deadly conclusion. The entire arena erupts in a deafening cheer for the bloody spectacle. As she turns to leave, the guide tries to stop her, promising an even more exciting match next. She angrily brushes him off, demanding to be taken to the manager right now. The guide obliges, leading her and her maid down a stone hallway. A smirking man with a scar over his eye greets them, asking what brings a noble lady to his arena. The manager leans back in his chair, smiling slyly as he awaits her answer. The woman asks to see Rihan for a closer look, and the manager immediately orders a subordinate to bring him. While she waits, she tries to calm herself, thinking she just needs to confirm his identity. The sound of a creaking door heightens her anxiety as she desperately prays it's just a coincidence. The guide returns, dragging a small, bound, red-haired boy before her and announcing, "I've brought him." She stares in disbelief at the boy, who is even smaller than her, his wounds untreated, wondering how a child could be a gladiator. The manager casually reassures her that the boy is just unconscious and orders him to be woken up. Her eyes widen in alarm as the guide lifts a bucket of water, and with a sudden splash, she watches in horror. The red-haired boy violently gasps and coughs, shocked awake by the cold water. "What are you doing?" she screams, furious that they would pour water on an injured child. She rushes to the boy's side, asking if he's all right, while telling Anne to find something to dry him with. A single tear traces a path down the wet cheek of the exhausted red-haired boy. A bound and injured red-haired boy with piercing golden eyes kneels on the floor, his appearance matching a description from a book. The blonde woman realizes the book confirms her future as the Empress and her fated death by the Emperor's sword. A man's hand snaps as he declares he's taking the boy away now that she's seen enough. A man in a patterned vest scoffs at her concern, callously stating that gladiators are slaves for whom mercy is a luxury. Clenching her fist, she resolves to save the boy, believing he's a special character from the book with an important role to play. She firmly informs the surprised man that she will be taking the boy with her. Pouring out a bag of gold coins, she asks the shocked man to name his price. The young blonde woman stands with a look of unwavering determination. After leaving the arena in a grand carriage, she sits with the boy in a new room, exhausted and vowing never to return. Gazing at him with a gentle expression, she feels a sense of relief, glad she was able to save Rihan. She hopes he might one day change her fate, but her thoughts are interrupted when he quietly addresses her as "my lady." Rihan looks up at her with a chillingly serious expression and asks who she wants him to kill. Seated across from her in the carriage, he presses the issue, asking what she requires and who his target is. The young lady cries out in shock, completely bewildered by his talk of killing. In a cute interlude, Rihan asks if he wasn't hired for an assassination, prompting her to frantically deny it. When he asks why she's taking him, she internally panics, knowing she can't reveal her fated death or his importance in the story. She claims she needs a skilled bodyguard, but Rihan questions why she wouldn't simply hire a knight instead. Flustered, she frets internally about what to do, realizing he's the only character from the book she's met, and fears he'll think she's crazy. Rihan seems to accept her silence, suggesting there is one other reason people employ gladiators, and prompting her to ask what it is. The scene flashes to a brutal image of a man whipping a defenseless person. The scene transitions to a sprawling, elegant mansion set in a lush garden. He repeats his grim suggestion that he's a toy to be beaten, and she again cries out in panic denial. Changing tactics, she declares she's taking him simply because she's taken a liking to him, leaving him completely stunned. With a determined look, she thinks to herself that when logic fails, she'll just have to rely on her guts. As a flustered Rihan questions her reason, she smiles brightly and insists they get his wounds treated first. In the carriage, she cheerfully plans to get him a haircut and new clothes, to which he quietly agrees. After a butler announces the meal is ready, she presents a feast to the newly cleaned up Rihan with an impressed "wow." Dressed in a new vest and tie, Rihan offers a simple, heartfelt thank you. In a voiceover, Rihan explains that he began receiving daily treatments from the physician while living with the young lady. He recalls how the servant's initial wariness faded because the young lady cherished him, ensuring no one dared treat him poorly. He continues that she always kept him by her side, holding his hand as they walked, and tried to give him anything he wanted. Watching her smile warmly at him, he notes that even now, she looks at him with the same kindness. Rihan silently wonders why she is being so incredibly kind to him when they've only known each other for a short time. Staring at his reflection in his teacup, he questions if her affection is based solely on his appearance. The young lady notices his distant expression and asks Rihan what's wrong. Rihan asks her to be honest about why she brought him there, but she seems confused, repeating that it's because she likes him. His intense stare returns as he reminds her that he is a gladiator who has killed people, causing her to freeze in place. She finally agrees to tell him the truth, and he realizes with anticipation that there was a hidden reason after all. Looking at him with sincere regret, she says that if she had known about his situation sooner, she would have rescued him much earlier. She gently pats his head, eagerly offering to start teaching him immediately. As she strokes his hair, she explains that good memories can help overcome the past, leaving him to ponder her words. His mind is filled with doubt, questioning if her simple kindness is truly all there is to her actions. In a different time and place, a blonde man identified as Lord Count listens as Rihan explains that a bag of money should cover his living expenses. The Lord Count's face darkens with fury as he coldly orders Rihan to take the money and leave his home. Rihan stands with his back turned, facing the ornate carpet as he listens to the order. As he's told to leave immediately, Rihan realizes his treatment is over and reflects on the blend of lies and truth during his stay. His thoughts drift back to the young lady who brought him there with a smile. Clutching the pouch of money, Rihan comes to a heartfelt conclusion. She saved him truly out of the kindness of her heart. With a loud bang, a blonde girl in a pink dress bursts into an office, calling out for her father. Her face twists with fury as she demands an explanation from someone she calls Edel. She explains the physician confirmed Rihan is fine, but her father questions if that gives her the right to send him away without notice. Her father warns that gladiators are dangerous, but she insists Rihan is different, prompting him to ask how. She explains that Rihan protects and listens to her, before admitting that this is only her perspective. Rihan interrupts, asking the Lord Count if he may speak, which surprises the blonde girl. She thinks of Rihan, but her internal thoughts reveal a secret. She only brought him there because of the book. Clutching her dress, she wrestles with the true selfish reason she saved him. Changing her approach, she pleads with her father to assign another knight so the three of them can travel together. Sighing in defeat, the Lord Count laments that a parent can't win against their child, and agrees to assign her a knight. The blonde girl beams with joy at her victory, while Rihan stands stoically beside her. The Lord Count allows Rihan to speak, who admits he was a gladiator, and would be dead if not for the young lady. With sincere gratitude, Rihan declares his wish to spend his life in service to the one who saved him. Later, the young lady approaches Rihan and apologizes for her father's harsh words. As she tries to explain, Rihan calmly states that it's all right, as that is how most people view gladiators. Taking his hands, she promises to treat him better from now on, regardless of her selfish motives for bringing him there. Rihan insists she has done more than enough, but she enthusiastically declares there's still much more she plans to do. Noticing his silence, she looks at him with concern and asks what's on his mind. Rihan kneels before her, taking her hand and vowing to protect her with everything he has for all time. Smiling gently, he adds a condition to his vow, that she never cast him aside. She smiles warmly, calling him a fool and assuring him that she would never abandon him. The narration reveals she never suspected the truth, as a mysterious book glows on a shelf. The narration concludes that her belief in their peaceful future was a complacent thought. In the library, she holds a glowing book, realizing it hasn't shone since the very first time she saw it. She wonders with hope if bringing Rihan into her life has changed her tragic fate for the better. As she stares into the book, her eyes widen in shock at what the glowing pages reveal. A command to clear them all out appears in the book, leaving her utterly bewildered. In a horrifying vision, she runs through a burning mansion, desperately calling for her father. Surrounded by smoke and chaos, she hears a cry for help and watches in terror. She discovers the bloody bodies of her staff, including her butler, chef, and maid Anne. Imperial soldiers block her path, declaring that the Emperor's command is to leave no one alive. Holding the book, she confronts the soldiers, screaming at them to stop and questioning their actions. She listens in horror as an order is given to eliminate every last traitor, leaving her to wonder what her family did wrong. The word traitor echoes in her mind as she desperately denies that her father could ever be one. She gasps in horror as she watches her father suddenly collapse to the ground. An armored man stands over her father, coldly stating he could have lived if he had simply stayed still. The man, revealed to be the Emperor, looks down with contempt and calls her father senile. Bleeding and enraged, her father screams that his life has no meaning now that he has lost his daughter. A tear streams down her face as she finally understands the grim reality of her vision. She sees her father telling the Emperor he committed treason to avenge her, his future daughter who died. The Emperor cruelly orders the grave of the former countess to be dug up, causing her father to scream in anguish. As the Emperor sentences his corpse to be abandoned in a field, her father lets out a final, agonizing cry. The vision ends abruptly as the book slams shut with a thud. Back in her room, she sits in stunned silence, unable to believe the horrific future she just witnessed for her family. Overcome with guilt, she begins to cry, blaming herself for her father's tragic fate. She breaks down, sobbing uncontrollably. Rihan kneels beside her, gently wiping away her tears with a handkerchief. He softly asks her why she is crying and if something is wrong, unaware of the vision she just saw. The terrible future flashes through her mind again, her death and her father's rebellion because of it. The haunting images of her grieving father and their burning mansion replay in her memory. The man with the blonde mustache looks at the book in confusion, asking if it's just a blank page. The blonde girl laughs nervously, trying to pass off the magical book as a simple joke. Looking at the open book on the floor, she wonders if Rihan might be different. She considers that since Rihan is a character from the book, he might be able to see its contents like her. Kneeling before the red-haired boy, she takes his hand and asks if he can see the book. Rihan picks up the book, asking if she means this one, as she silently pleads for him to see it. He flips through the pages and confirms her fears to him. It's just a book with no content, and her world shatters. As she begins to sob, a concerned Rihan asks what's wrong. Overwhelmed by despair, she breaks down completely, narrating that his words unleashed an endless flood of tears. She laments her solitude, feeling that no one in the world could possibly understand her pain. Rihan watches helplessly as she cries, calling out her title in concern. Standing before the girl's father, Rihan firmly vows to be of help in protecting his lady. The man agrees, and, with a scratch of his quill, assigns Rihan to begin training with the knights immediately. Now in a formal uniform, Rihan smiles with determination, promising to work hard. A wooden training dummy splinters under a powerful blow. Two knights observe Rihan's training, impressed that he not only adapted quickly, but also defeated their youngest member. They agree on his incredible progress, questioning if Henry, the other escort, is even needed anymore. Rihan approaches the two knights to ask a question, wondering why he has never seen the Countess at the mansion. His question is met with stunned silence and looks of pure alarm from the two men. The blonde knight grabs Rihan, sternly warning him not to ask about the Countess. Rihan is shocked to learn the Countess died in childbirth, finally understanding the lady's isolation. The blonde's knight sadly explains that the lady grew up alone, without a mother figure to guide her. In a lonely memory, the young girl stands by herself. As narration reveals, she never had a single friend. Rihan's resolve hardens, as he now sees her not just as a lady to serve, but as his only friend to protect. He stares ahead, his purpose now crystal clear. In a tender moment, he comforts the crying girl, gently wiping her tears and promising to protect her. Returning to the present, she softly calls his name, and he responds dutifully. Embracing him from behind, she offers a heartfelt apology and thanks, which he gently accepts. She then stuns him by announcing her plan. She's going to run away from home. She analyzes her grim future from the book, identifying the Crown Prince as her future killer. Again, she repeats her decision to run away, leaving Rihan completely shocked. Realizing her mistake, she quickly backpedals, claiming it's her friend who plans to run away. A memory flashes of the night, stating she grew up without a single friend. Rihan thoughtfully considers her slip of the tongue, murmuring the word, friend. Steeling herself, the blonde girl thinks that crying is useless. She must take action. She resolves to avoid the Crown Prince at all costs, determined to escape her fate of becoming the Empress. A vision shows her enthroned beside the prince, confirming her belief that a commoner couldn't possibly know royalty. The book reveals a future where Rihan kneels before the Emperor, begging for her life, presenting her with her first option. She clutches her chest in doubt, wondering if an emperor would ever listen to a mere commoner. Deciding on option 2, she resolves to flee the moment rumors of her becoming the Empress begin. She carefully broaches the topic with Rihan, asking about the friend she mentioned who is running away. She asks if a woman could survive alone, and his blunt no visibly disappoints her. He explains the dangers for a noblewoman traveling alone, from the difficulty of escaping to the threat of bandits. She dismisses hiring a knight due to family loyalties, and he suggests finding a guard who isn't a knight. With earnest conviction, Rihan looks at her and offers himself for the role. The simple, brilliant idea leaves her speechless, wondering how she didn't think of it herself. She nervously poses a hypothetical question, asking what he would do if she were to leave. An unspoken understanding passes between them in the quiet sunlight. As she begins to ask what would happen if she ever left, her voice trails off. Leaning in close, he finishes her thought with a solemn vow to protect her, wherever and whenever she might go. His hand holds hers tightly as he vows to protect her, even if she were no longer a count's daughter. Time passes peacefully as the last chills of early spring finally fade away. With the arrival of a new season, the narrator announces that the season of balls has begun. The blonde girl looks up in shock, questioning the mention of a debutante ball. Panicked, she realizes that an imperial ball directly contradicts her plan to avoid the imperial family. She nervously asks her father if she can skip the ball, claiming she gets nervous in large crowds, but he reacts with surprise. He embraces her, pleading for her to grant his wish just this once. A dark vision from the book flashes through her mind, showing her father screaming in agony, begging for his wife's grave to be left alone. Haunted by the vision of her father's tragic future, she reluctantly agrees to attend the ball. A few days later, preparations at the Grand Mansion are underway. A maid finishes brushing her long blonde hair, announcing that she is ready. Now in a stunning ball gown, she worries it's too eye-catching, while her maid, Anne, gasps in admiration. Filled with anxiety, she frets that once she's in the palace, an encounter with the Crown Prince is inevitable. She stares ahead with a look of worried determination. Rihan, dressed in a formal uniform, waits for her by the carriage and addresses her as his lady. He smiles warmly, offering to be her escort for the evening. Taking his hand, she accepts his offer as he reassures her not to worry. The carriage pulls up to a magnificent sun-drenched palace as a voice announces their arrival. Stepping onto the palace grounds, she looks up in awe, confirming that this is the imperial palace. As she and her father ascend the grand staircase, she tells Rihan she'll return after one song and asks him to wait for her. Rihan watches her leave with a concerned expression, wishing for her safe return. Inside, the grand ballroom is alive with the chatter of elegantly dressed nobles. From a balcony overlooking the crowd, an older man with white hair raises his glass, welcoming the empire's finest young talents. She identifies the speaker as the emperor and scans the crowd, wondering with relief if the crown prince has decided not to attend. A close-up shows the emperor's regal and composed face. Feeling drained from the tension, she breathes a sigh of relief, thankful that the crown prince is nowhere to be seen. Her relief shatters as she looks up and sees the emperor staring down at her with an unsettling intensity. Panicked, she quickly looks away, praying that he didn't actually notice her. A young man with brown hair approaches, addressing her as Lady Edelise Brill, and she turns to ask who he is. He introduces himself as Ruta, son of Viscount Weiss, and politely begins to ask if she has a partner for the dance. As she prepares to refuse, another voice interrupts, and a hand rests on her shoulder, causing her to look up in shock. The emperor smiles down at her, smoothly offering to be her partner himself if she is without one. The emperor repeats his offer to be her dance partner, his gaze fixed on her. Smiling politely, she thanks him but claims she just found a partner, prompting him to ask who it is. She gestures toward an empty space, announcing her partner is Viscount Weiss, who has mysteriously vanished. Noticing the man has disappeared, the emperor coolly states that he will have to take his place instead. She tries to politely decline, citing her lack of dancing skill, but he dismisses her concerns and tells her to take his hand. Forced to accept, she inwardly curses the Viscount for abandoning her, vowing never to forget his cowardice. As they dance, the surrounding nobles begin to gossip, identifying the young lady with His Majesty as Count Brill's newly debuted daughter. The whispers continue as more guests recognize her as the young woman making her debut tonight. Another noblewoman watches them, murmuring what a pity it is for the girl to be with him. While dancing, she feels deeply uncomfortable, wondering if the dance was always meant to be so intimate. The emperor leans in and inhales deeply near her neck, causing her to flinch away in alarm. He pulls back with a strange smile, calling the situation delightful, and promising she'll be hearing good news soon. The emperor walks away, leaving her standing alone and bewildered in the middle of the ballroom. Her mind reels in horror as she realizes the implication of his words, thinking he must be mad to consider her when he's even older than her father. Her father finally finds her, apologizing for being held up in a conversation with the Duke. He asks what happened, but she deflects, claiming she's just tired and wants to leave immediately. The blonde girl runs toward the carriage, urgently calling out Rihan's name. Rihan, now wearing a red cloak over his black suit, strides ahead of the blonde girl through a lavish hall. Rihan notices the young lady looks terribly pale and asks if something happened, but she curtly tells him to get on. After a view of the grand estate, Rihan's voice is heard asking if she is all right over an image of a teacup. Rihan asks the silent, slumped-over young lady what happened inside the palace to make her so quiet. She confesses with a shudder that her first dance partner was the emperor, a thought that still gives her chills. Rihan's face contorts with fury as he realizes that the old emperor was touching her, regretting that he ever let her go alone. Crying, the young lady laments being treated so horribly. Rihan kneels before the weeping girl, gently reminding her that life should be cherished. A spark of realization hits her as she repeats his words, then cheerfully pats his head and announces she'll start teaching him again. Taking her by surprise, Rihan kneels and asks the young lady if she would dance with him. She asks why he's surprised when he's the one who asked. He admits he thought she'd refuse, but she smiles, saying she couldn't say no to him. As music seems to fill the air, they begin to dance together. While dancing, she asks how he learned, and he smiles, revealing he practiced on his own. He explains in a flashback that he secretly watched her during a lesson, and has been practicing by himself ever since. When he fumbles a step, he apologizes for his inexperience, but she kindly reassures him that he's doing great for his first time. She smiles brightly, thinking that even without any musicians, Rihan feels that this moment, dancing alone with her, is more than enough as they continue their private dance. A sudden knock at the door interrupts their dance. They both stop, turning in surprise toward the source of the sound. Her father stands in the doorway, sternly calling for Edelise and demanding she come to the drawing room at once. He insists the matter is urgent, and she worries at how much paler he looks now than when she'd left the palace. An imperial messenger unrolls a scroll, officially appointing Count Brill's daughter, Emilis, as a candidate for Empress Consort. The decree commands her to enter the palace within 7 days, leaving her stunned at being named consort, not empress. Her eyes widen in shock as she wonders if the future she knew from the book has somehow changed. She rejects the idea as impossible, recalling that in the book she was always destined to be the empress. Her mind races as she questions the change. She should be the crown prince's consort first, not the old emperor's. Her father places a reassuring hand on her shoulder, telling his daughter not to worry. With a look of grim determination, he promises to find a solution, as she anxiously hopes for a way out. She frantically searches her book, realizing with dread that there is no mention of an empress consort, only an empress. With her father's reassurance echoing in her mind, she panics, questioning if the book was fake, but knowing Rihan was real. Dark, shadowy figures loom as her mind screams with confusion over the unforeseen events. Rihan enters, explaining that the Count told him what happened, his voice trailing off as he sees her distress. In a panic, she tells Rihan she is to become the Emperor's consort, confessing that this was never part of the story she knew. She desperately wonders if there's any way to disobey the Emperor's command without having to run away. Rihan reveals there is another way. They can make the Emperor himself refuse the marriage. Suddenly, she pulls a small dagger, holding it to her own face as a stunned Rihan looks on. Her desperate plan is revealed. She intends to scar herself to escape the marriage. With tears in her eyes, she holds the blade to her cheek and asks Rihan to help her, causing him to cry out her name in horror. Admitting she's too afraid to do it herself, she begs him for help, and he screams, "My lady!" in terrified protest. In a moment of quiet resolve, she simply says, "It's fine." She thinks to herself that she can't do it because it will hurt too much. Again, she pleads for Rihan's help, her eyes filled with fear, while he shouts her name in desperation. Rihan grabs her arm, yelling that it's absolutely not happening, but she argues it will be fine if it's just one deep cut. Clasping her hand firmly, he stops her and insists there is another way. Her eyes well up with tears of hope as she asks him what it is. As she sits with the knife, he kneels before her and asks if she would be all right with a dishonorable method. She agrees without hesitation, saying it's better than treason. He promises to visit her that night and warns her to keep the maids away. The scene settles on a quiet, moonlit window, anticipating the night's clandestine meeting. Rihan finds the blonde girl waiting for him with a packed suitcase, confirming her plan to run away immediately and leaving him baffled. She proudly lists the light outfits she packed, but he bluntly informs her they are not running away and will not need any luggage. He explains that fleeing would be treason, revealing a new plan. He will come to her tonight and warns her to keep the maids away. Drawing a gleaming dagger, he prepares to ask her one final, serious question. Holding the dagger before her, he asks if she is truly prepared to do something so dishonorable. With unwavering determination, she declares that she doesn't care about honor if it means staying alive. He accepts her decision and raises the dagger as she watches. With a sudden violent slash, a spray of red fills the air as she gasps in horror. She cries out his name in shock, realizing Rihan has cut his own hand, and rushes to offer her handkerchief as blood drips to the floor. Holding her close, the gravity of the situation hangs in the air as he prepares to ask his question one last time. With his hand now wrapped in her handkerchief, a stunned Rihan quietly processes her command. She turns to face him, her determined gaze revealing a hidden agenda. A flustered Rihan confronts her, angrily realizing her plan is to use his blood to fake her virginity. She coolly confirms his accusation, adding that she is not a clueless noble since she has already foreseen her own death. As she lies on the bed, she innocently asks if staging this scene means the two of them will now be married. He is stunned by her question, asking why a lady like her would ever consider marrying a commoner. She clarifies that she only meant for them to pretend to be married after they escape together. She explains that a fake marriage is the only way to avoid suspicion while living together, leaving him to quietly consider her logic. His expression turns grave as he admits there is something he's been thinking about for a while. From across the room, he looks down at her on the bed and solemnly announces his intention to leave. She sits up in shock, unable to believe he is serious, but he confirms his decision is no joke. He takes a step forward, explaining that today's events have made his decision clear, and instructs her not to deny the implications when the blood is found. Standing over her, he admits he realized in that moment that she would truly consider marrying a commoner like him. She sits on her bed in stunned silence as he once again warns her not to deny what has happened. Her eyes widen as the terrible truth sinks in. His words about leaving were not a joke at all. Whoosh! She leaps from the bed and rushes after him, desperately calling his name. Catching him, she tearfully asks if she did something wrong, wondering if her talk of a pretend marriage was the cause. Clinging to his hand, she desperately offers him a title, or anything else he could want, if he'll only stay. He gently takes her hands, asking only that she continues to live her life as she has before. He thinks to himself that the story no longer matters. She is now someone he can't imagine living without. She tearfully demands to know why he is leaving, but he refuses to tell her, breaking his promise to stay with her. Offering a final apology, he promises he will return, but she realizes with a heavy heart that nothing she says can make him stay. A vision of her younger self echoes her desperate plea. If she is ever in danger, he must not forget to come and save her. Her hand flies to her chest as she struggles to breathe. overwhelmed by the pain of his departure. Tears streaming down her face, she cries out, wondering how she can possibly go on without him. She demands that he remember his promise to come for her, her plea met by his unwavering, determined gaze. He clutches the handkerchief she gave him, a final memento of their bond. In a tender gesture, he gently wipes a tear from her cheek. He leans down and places a soft farewell kiss on her forehead. He holds her close for a final, silent moment of goodbye. Her plea to keep his promise echoes in his mind, stealing his resolve as he prepares to leave. The scene shifts years into the future, where a woman with long purple hair stands by a window, whispering Raihan's name. Narration reveals that the scandal forced her from the capital, and while she was sent back to her estate, her father sent knights to search for Raihan. Years later, an older Edelise looks up from the fateful book, her expression somber. The story jumps forward 7 years, teasing that something completely unexpected is about to happen. Now 25 years old, Edelise Brill sits at a table, looking up in shock at some unseen news. The purple-haired woman remains at the window, her quiet moment interrupted by the overlaid image of a smiling older man. A smug, blonde-haired man with a mustache calmly announces that he is now Marquis Brill, delivering the news as if it were a grand victory. Her father informs Edelise that the Emperor has chosen her to be his Empress, leaving her stunned and in disbelief. Thump! Holding the proposal, she reels in shock, questioning if he means the current Emperor. A flashback explains that 1 year ago, a new Emperor staged a successful coup against the corrupt royal family. As a shadowy warrior stands victorious, the blonde-haired man from earlier smugly confirms he is now Marquis Brill, calling it wonderful news. Edelise recalls the new Emperor's ruthlessness, remembering how he ordered the former Countess's grave to be dug up immediately. The flashback ends with the image of the young new Emperor standing triumphant atop a mountain of skulls. Edelise reflects that she was away in her territory during the upheaval. Back in the present, she stands and firmly refuses the marriage proposal, shocking Marquise Brill. Turning away, she processes the shock of the sudden proposal. Clutching her skirt, she realizes with dawning horror that this is unfolding exactly like the story in the book. Her fear turns to resolve as she vows that she will not die and must find a way to survive. The chilling image of the Emperor on his throne of skulls flashes through her mind. A close-up shows a man in a dark cloak fastened with an ornate golden brooch. The man is revealed to have striking red hair and a warm smile. He looks on with a gentle and confident expression, surrounded by flowers. Taking her hands, the red-haired man asks if she remembers him as she stares in disbelief, whispering Raihan's name. Overjoyed, she confirms she could never forget and exclaims that she has so much to ask him. She silently wonders where he has been all this time and why he never sent her a single letter. Kneeling before him, she earnestly asks if he remembers the promise he made to her before he left. He smiles, reassuring her that he has never forgotten his promise, not even for a moment. Overcome with emotion, she throws her arms around him in a tight hug. Raihan holds her, a faint blush on his cheek as he embraces her. They share a quiet, tender moment, holding each other close by the window. Suddenly, she pulls back with a gasp, asking him what's wrong. She places her hands on his shoulders, her expression filled with concern. After he asks what's wrong, she blurts out that the Emperor has proposed, but she vows she will never become his Empress. His expression turns serious as he asks if marrying the Emperor is truly so against her will. Looking him in the eyes, she declares that she wants to be with him, Raihan, not the Emperor. Raihan looks at her, momentarily surprised by her heartfelt confession. She nervously explains her plan to live as a commoner, insisting they can survive on the jewels she saved up. He gently cups her face, urging her to be greedy and ask for more. Leaning close, he whispers his desire to give her everything she could ever want. Flustered, she turns away, insisting she's given up her title and has no intention of being greedy. He tells her she doesn't have to give up, promising to come for her tomorrow and asking her to wait for him. Grabbing his hand, she gives him an ultimatum. If he's not there by noon, she will leave on her own. Her expression is set with unwavering determination. Raihan watches her with a soft, understanding smile. The next day at the estate, a frantic voice is heard calling for her. A maid rushes in to announce that His Imperial Majesty is personally coming to pick her up, throwing Edelise into a panic. Standing on the balcony, she hears her name being called. An Imperial escort on horseback gallops through the gates of the estate. Edelise and her father stand outside, formally waiting for the Emperor's arrival. As a rider approaches, she silently pleads for Raihan to keep his promise and come for her. Her face falls with worry as time runs out. Her despair instantly turns to radiant joy as she sees someone in the distance. Rihan appears before her, dressed in a stunning and regal military uniform. She runs and leaps into his arms, embracing him tightly. Buried in his shoulder, she breathes a sigh of relief, thankful he came on time. Her joy evaporates as someone formally greets the Emperor, and she looks around in confusion, asking where he is. Her world shatters as she sees her father and all the maids kneeling before Rihan. Her shock is palpable as she stands before the red-haired man, asking what is happening. Rihan kneels before Edelise, telling his wife that he has come to keep his promise. He smiles warmly, holding her hand gently in his. The horrifying truth dawns on her as she wonders if Rihan is the Emperor, his determined expression confirming her fear. Her world crumbles, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock, pulled from her thoughts. She stares blankly as Rihan gently calls her name. Standing before him and her stunned maids, she demands to know how on earth he became the Emperor. He explains that he worked tirelessly until he finally became a man worthy of her. Looking at her with longing, he admits that he endured every single day for her. He sweeps her into his arms, confessing how much he missed her, leaving her utterly bewildered. Flustered by his sudden embrace, she clasps her hands together nervously. He carries her toward an imperial carriage, reassuring her she's not heavy as she panics, realizing this is a point of no return. Calling his name, she desperately apologizes, trying to back out of the situation. With a pleading look, she asks if she can refuse his proposal. His warm expression instantly vanishes, replaced by a cold, intimidating stare. He leans in close, asking if she dares to run away after taking the Emperor's first night, leaving her speechless. As nights look on, he carries her toward the carriage, publicly questioning her plan to flee after their supposed night together. She frantically denies his claim, but he coolly questions if nothing really happened between them. He playfully reminds her of the blood spilled that night, implying he gave her his first time, horrifying the maids and mortifying Edelise. An elegant white and gold carriage departs from the estate, carrying them away. Fuming with her arms crossed, a chibi Edelise glares angrily. Now inside the carriage, he apologizes for teasing her, but she retorts that his joke went too far. Blushing, she can't get his words about taking his first time out of her head. He continues to tease her about being the bold lady who took his first night, laughing as she begs him to stop. His expression softens as he sincerely tells her that he truly missed her. Looking at the man before her, she quietly admits that she still finds it all impossible to believe. She struggles with the truth, knowing Rihan is the Emperor, but unable to reconcile the two identities in her mind. A tremor of fear runs through her as she sits beside him. A memory of her asking to refuse him flashes through her mind. He looks down with a serious expression, quietly saying her name. Sitting across from her, he directly asks if she is refusing to marry him. She tries to calm herself, reasoning that the future must have changed since her father is now a marquis. Taking a breath, she resolves to be honest with him. She clarifies her stance. It's marrying the Emperor that she hates. A faint, knowing smile plays on his lips as he listens to her explanation. She confronts him, demanding to know why no one told her the truth, and he reveals that her father, Marquis Brill, helped him raise an army. She stares in shock, wondering what kind of army he could possibly be talking about. He cheerfully confirms her father joined the rebellion, which is how he became emperor, causing her to cry out in disbelief. She flashes back to feeling guilty over her father's death in the book, only to learn he helped start a rebellion himself. He explains that he sent the official proposal through her father, but came to see her personally because he missed her too much. With a cute, cheerful expression, he continues to smile at her, and she asks why he's so happy. He plainly states the truth she's been avoiding. Edelise, I am the Emperor. The full weight of the situation hits her as she realizes, in horror, that she's been speaking informally to him this entire time. She hastily apologizes for her impertinence, but he urges her to speak comfortably, calling her my master. Completely baffled, she questions why he would call her master when he is the Emperor. He gently plays with a lock of her hair, telling her that in his heart, he has never been free of her. Flustered by his bold words, she wonders if there is anything he's afraid to say. She sits formally, insisting she cannot speak to him so casually, and that he must maintain his dignity as emperor. He looks away, acknowledging with a hint of sadness that things are different now from when they were younger. Edelise reflects that after 7 years, she is no longer a young lady, and he is no longer just a bodyguard. A flashback shows a young, chibi-style Rihan with a single tear rolling down his cheek. Shaking, she formally addresses him as Your Majesty. Holding her hands, Rihan confesses with a gentle expression that he longed for and missed her dearly. Looking at their joined hands, she thinks to herself that when he puts it like that, she has no choice. He smiles brightly, overjoyed to hear her agree to call him Rihan again. Edelise sets a boundary, insisting she will be strictly formal in public, as an empress can't speak informally to the emperor. With a knowing smirk, he asks if this means she won't be formal when they're alone, leaving a chibi Edelise confused. A flustered chibi Edelise agrees, feeling herself being drawn into his pace as the scene shifts to their carriage. As their ornate carriage travels through the woods, she tentatively calls out his name. Leaning uncomfortably close, he whispers, "Yes, my master," causing her to blush and tell him he's too near. She suggests they sit across from each other, but holding her hand, he sweetly refuses, saying he couldn't hold her hand that way. He smiles charmingly as she closes her eyes, completely flustered and wondering if there's anything he's afraid to say. Looking out the carriage window, she asks him what he meant by having many things he wants to do with her. He leans in, their faces inches apart, and whispers suggestively about what she thinks they should do. Stuttering in shock, she demands to know what he means, but he just grins, telling her she'll find out after they're married. Peeking out the carriage window, she questions if he's really the Rihan she knew, and he reminds her that he's the one she saved. She clarifies that their first night could happen someday, just not right now, and he latches onto her words with a smile. She yells that she said not right now, but her protest is cut short, as Rihan's expression turns deadly serious. Rihan holds her close, hushing her as she wonders why the carriage has suddenly stopped before leaving her family's territory. Crash! A hand shatters the carriage window, reaching for her. Rihan shoves her aside, shouting her name as she screams in terror. Cries of an ambush ring out as Edelise stares in horror at a bloody knife that flew through the window. Rihan's eye widens in shock as he calls out her name. He stands protectively before her, asking her to wait for him as he faces the threat with a grim look. Stepping out of the carriage, he tells someone to hold on, as his bloodied hand grips the door. A knight asks if he's unharmed, but Rihan furiously orders everyone to stay away from the carriage. He reflects on his 7-year struggle, crushing all who resisted to establish his imperial authority. His motivation is revealed in a single thought. He did it all for his wife, Edelise. Rihan exits the carriage, telling Edelise to hold on while leaving a bloody handprint on the door. He tells a trembling Edelise to stay inside, and that he will return shortly. A flash of memory reveals the assassin's blades were aimed directly at Edelise. His face contorts with rage as he realizes his wife was the target, growling, "Who dares?" As his knights shout orders to seize the attackers, Edelise cowers inside the carriage, trembling. Clutching her shawl, she realizes with dread that this ambush was not in the book she read. Hearing footsteps approach, her fear intensifies as she wonders who is coming. A shadowy figure lunges with a blade, and she realizes with horror they were aiming for her all along. The assassin strikes, and Edelise lets out a terrified scream. A hand covered in blood grips the window frame as Rihan calls her name, reassuring her that it's all right now. Bloodied but smiling, he tells her it's over and she no longer has to worry, but her eyes widen in pure terror. A dark vision overcomes her. A menacing Rihan calls her full name Edelise Brill, and she cries out in horror. As he starts to ask if she's all right, she screams, "No!" Edelise continues to scream, clutching her head in absolute terror. A vision of a sword piercing her hand flashes as Rihan thinks he was inconsiderate, vowing to compose himself before returning. She realizes the vision was just like the book described, a dream of the Emperor's sword piercing her. The horrific vision of her hand being stabbed repeats, as Rihan internally notes that she frightens easily. Looking down at his bloodied hand, he decides to compose himself and asks her to wait for a moment. Lying unconscious, Edelise's last thought is that she wants to live, as Rihan looks on with a pained expression. The scene closes on a book as she narrates that she had a dream. The blonde girl recalls a recurring dream where a sword pierces her, just as it was written in the book. She watches a vision of her own bloody corpse, dismissing the nightmare as something familiar and unchanging. A man's voice calls out her full name, Edelise Brill, as a strange energy envelops the scene. Confused, Edelise looks around, as the man's intense gaze remains fixed on her. A red-haired man in a fur-collared cloak stares ahead with a grim and determined expression. Edelise awakens with a gasp, jolted from her terrifying dream. A red-haired man leans over her bed calling her name, just as she recalls the same recurring dream. The red-haired man urgently calls out Edelise, trying to wake her from her nightmare. As the man asks if she's awake, her eyes fly open in terror, and she lets out a piercing scream. The red-haired man tries to comfort Idalise, but she huddles on her bed, crying that the Emperor is going to kill her. Terrified by his approach, she begs him not to come any closer. Squeezing her eyes shut, she silently pleads that she doesn't want to die. A hand gently touches her hair, as a voice asks if she remembers. A flashback shows the red-haired man holding her as she wakes with a scream, just as she did moments ago. He recalls a past moment, explaining how he would soothe her by holding her close. She apologizes to Rahan for causing him worry, as the memory of his comforting embrace lingers. She remembers how he would suddenly appear to console her whenever she was upset, gently wiping away her tears. A vision of a younger Rahan appears as she reflects that she must have seemed like a troublesome child to him. The vision of Rihan embraces her tenderly. Holding her face, he tells Idalise that she never knew how disappointed he felt, leaving her teary-eyed and confused. Back in her room, she apologizes to Rahan for worrying him, and he gently asks if she is all right now. When he mentions she fainted, she looks away nervously, unsure how to explain. She apologizes for her behavior, and Rahan promises to be more careful in the future. She looks down, realizing with a pang of guilt that Rahan was only trying to protect her. In a warm memory, she embraces him, thinking that he is the reason she is still alive. She hugs him tightly, sincerely thanking him for saving her life. He asks if her promise is still valid, and she confirms it will be for her entire lifetime. Looking at him with resolve, she vows that she will surely save him, no matter the circumstances. She connects the image of the young Rahan from her childhood to the tyrant emperor destined to kill her. She acknowledges that her childhood friend and her future killer are the same person. A glimmer of hope appears as she realizes her actions now could prevent the future tyrant from ever existing. Returning to the present, she tells Rihan she is fine and asks him to let go of their embrace. He pulls her closer, refusing to let go, and stating that her saying she's fine isn't enough for him. Looking at her with longing, he explains that his low status in the past forced him to let her go. With a sudden move, he sweeps her into his arms, declaring that things are different now. Cradling her, he looks up at her with a gentle smile as she questions what he means by all that you couldn't finish. In a different, more intimate setting, she compliments the excellent aroma of an aged wine he offers her. Rehan smiles warmly, dressed in a simple white robe. With his robe open, revealing his muscular physique, he holds a glass and bottle of wine, leaving her to wonder how things escalated. The scene repeats as she comments on the 21-year-old wine from the Verdi region. Back in the hall, she protests that she is heavy, but he dismisses it, claiming he could carry her all day. Flustered, she tells someone named Alrea to stop joking and put her down immediately. He ignores her pleas and continues carrying her through the lavishly decorated hall. While she insists on being put down, he calmly says she must be hungry. He finally sets her down and offers his hand to escort her to the dining hall, leaving her speechless and blushing. Walking ahead of him, she insists she isn't walking fast because she's embarrassed, while he privately thinks she's cute. As she walks through the tidy corridors and sees the splendid decorations, the reality of her situation begins to sink in. She realizes with a sense of awe that she has truly arrived at the Imperial Castle. Rihan watches her with a soft and caring expression as they proceed through the palace. As Rayan laughs, Idalise asks why, and he explains he remembered something from the past, noting she hasn't changed. A flashback shows a chibi Idalise happily dragging a chibi Rihan by the hand as he recalls the memory. He remembers her wanting to show him a place with delicious food, causing a blushing Idalise to protest in the present. Brushing off her embarrassment, Rihan reveals he brought the chef from her favorite restaurant here, leaving her speechless. As various dishes appear, she recalls the restaurant, Il Fonte, was so popular she only managed to go 3 times. Flustered by his grand gesture, she blushes as he tells her she's as adorable now as she was back then. She thinks to herself that Rihan was the cuter one, and he leans in, asking what she thinks of him now. Looking away, she admits to herself that she couldn't possibly call the man before her cute anymore. He laughs and says he believes her, though she can tell from his tone that he doesn't at all. She looks up at him, realizing his teasing is just his way of being considerate toward her. She reflects on his character, remembering that he has always been a gentle person. Idalise happily enjoys the meal, while Rihan watches with a warm smile, telling her to eat slowly. Later that evening, a silver-haired knight formally addresses Idalise as the Empress, while maids attend to her. The smiling knight explains he has been temporarily assigned to serve as His Majesty's escort. He clarifies his new duty, The emperor has personally assigned him to protect the empress. Her thoughts drift to Rihan and the gentle way he held her. Annalise formally accepts the knight, Sir Phasis, into her service, and he replies that the honor is his. Sir Phasis opens a grand door, informing her that His Majesty is waiting for her inside. As she enters, she reflects on the irony of her situation after struggling so hard not to become the empress. Her cheeks flush as a sudden realization hits her. Being married means they have to sleep in the same room. Kia! Rahan's sudden appearance startles her, and she demands to know when he arrived. He tells her he just got there, and asks what she was thinking, but she deflects, claiming she was just admiring the palace. With a sly grin, he leans in and suggestively remarks that the palace isn't the only thing that's big. He offers her a glass of wine, explaining he wanted to share a drink and some dessert with her. Her gaze is immediately drawn to his muscular chest, leaving her utterly flustered. He describes the fine vintage wine to her, and she nervously agrees that the scent is wonderful. He gazes down at her with a soft, intimate expression, making her heart flutter. The moment is charged with unspoken tension as they stand incredibly close. Trying to act nonchalant, she nervously laughs while complimenting the wine. She quickly pivots to the dessert to distract herself, and he playfully asks if she wants more. Declining more food, she picks up a small sweet, insisting that moderation is best. He wraps his arms around her from behind, whispering that a bit of exercise might be good for digestion. She freezes in shock, her face turning bright red at his bold suggestion. He points out her red face, and she denies it's from him, thinking the situation is getting dangerous. Resolved, she tells Rihan she's fine to drink more, seen through the lens of a swirling wine glass. With newfound confidence, she declares a challenge, believing her alcohol tolerance is stronger than his. Now tipsy and cheerful, she drunkenly brings up a memory from their past. She proudly tells him she can handle strong liquor now, to which he responds with amusement. Pouring more wine, she teases him for eating mushrooms, which he used to hate for being squishy. Rihan gently takes the bottle from her hand, telling her plainly that she's drunk. She leans against the table with a dreamy smile, insisting that she is totally fine. As she asks for more wine, he soberly changes the subject, asking how she's been all this time. His serious question cuts through her drunken haze, and she admits her life has been uneventful, rarely leaving her home. A flashback shows her sitting alone, surrounded by towering stacks of books, as she explains she mostly read. Turning the question back on him, she says his life couldn't have been ordinary, and he begins to tell his story. A flashback begins on the day of Edelice's debutante ball, where a butler approaches a younger Rihan, asking if he's from the arena. Rihan questions the man, who introduces himself as Fogren Hillsbane, the butler of the Duke of Larkseed. The butler reveals the Duke wishes to meet with him, addressing him as young Master Kirhan and leaving Rihan stunned. Stunned, the red-haired young man demands to know how the butler knows his name. Facing the butler, Rihan furiously questions how he knows the name Kirhan, as the man calmly states his grace wishes to see him. The butler, Fogren Hillsbane, explains that 9 years ago, Rihan was kidnapped and sold to a gladiator arena. The butler asks if it's true he was called Rihan in the arena, and Rihan confirms it, admitting he doesn't remember anything from before. Facing the Duke of Larkseed, Rihan asks why he should believe he is Kirhan, and the Duke expresses his trust in his intelligence division. Internally, Rihan concludes that the Duke isn't lying, and realizes that if this is true, he could gain a higher status. His goal is to reach her, but when the Duke invites him to his estate, Rihan asks for time to think. Rihan narrates that upon hearing Edelice was chosen as a candidate for Empress, he went to the Duke's mansion, needing power to protect her. Memory of Edelice in a white dress surfaces, as she reminds him of his promise to come and get her. He reflects that, without the Duke's help, he might have remained nothing more than her guard or a fake husband. In the memory, the Duke asked Rihan to come with him to his estate, and Rihan requests time to consider the offer. Rihan recalls Edelice asking him to remember his promise, realizing he would have been a mere guard otherwise. The Duke, lying in bed, asks Rihan if he wishes to inherit his title, telling him the condition is to release him from his resentment. The Duke makes a grand promise. If Rihan succeeds in toppling the Emperor, he will give him the entire empire. Filled with determination, Rihan vows to bring him the Emperor's head, thinking he will do anything to stand by Edelice's side. He narrates that after accepting the offer, he endured training far harsher than the arena and faced dozens of assassins. A flashback shows a younger, battle-worn Rihan with a fierce look in his eyes as blood splatters nearby. His story concludes as he recounts gathering his men, rooting out traitors, and overthrowing the Emperor, nearly dying countless times. Back in the present, Edelise looks at him with tearful eyes, acknowledging how rough his life must have been. As her hand gently cups his face, Rihan gives her a soft, appreciative smile. Rihan explains that true desire gives one the strength to push through anything, prompting Edelise to ask if he achieved his goal. She playfully pats his head, congratulating him on his unknown success with a bright smile. With her hand on his head, he blushes slightly, asking if she'll let him be spoiled for just a moment. Rihan suddenly stands, telling a confused Edelise that she's had enough to drink and it's time to rest. She insists she can drink more, but as he holds her steady, he points out she finished a whole bottle, leaving her in disbelief. As she's laid gently onto a bed, Edelise realizes, with a blush, that she got drunk much faster than she thought. Rihan places his hand on the bed beside her head and quietly says, "Now." Leaning over her, he gently insists that she should really get some rest. Holding her hands, Rihan admits he was worried she'd treat him like she used to, making her wonder at his sudden change from clingy to assertive. She turns away, completely flustered and screaming, "No way!" in her mind. His robe falling open to reveal his scarred chest, he leans closer and asks if she is nervous. With her eyes squeezed shut, she thinks that anyone would be nervous in this kind of situation. He tells her that her nervousness is a relief, and when she asks why, he explains it means she sees him as a man. Lying amongst a bed of flowers, a deeply blushing Edelise is lost for words. Her thoughts race as she realizes that in every single way, he's nothing like the boy she once knew. Leaning down to kiss her, he whispers that her seeing him as a man is exactly why he likes it. Edelise's flustered expression reveals the full effect his words and actions are having on her. Pulling back just a little, Rihan admits to Edelise that he may have gotten a bit ahead of himself. He clarifies that to her it might not seem like much, but he is holding himself back a lot right now. Edelise realizes how hard it is for him to control himself and reminds him they aren't married yet, to which he replies, "Then." A confident grin spreads across his face as he asks if this means he won't have to hold back after their wedding. Edelise stammers in shock at his bold declaration, and he simply replies, "Understood." Getting up from the bed, Rihan says he needs to give instructions to the Chamberlain, ignoring Edelise's frantic call of his name. He looks back with a charming smirk, telling her to rest well, and reminding her that the wedding hasn't happened yet. Alone in the room, Edelise sits up, completely stunned and muttering, "Wow." Blushing furiously, she clutches her dress and thinks, "And he was worried I wouldn't see him as a man?" The scene transitions to the Grand Palace on a bright and sunny morning. Edelise sips her tea at the breakfast table, thinking to herself that everything that happened yesterday was entirely her fault. Rihan approaches her from behind, asking if she has finished eating, and she confirms that she just did. A woman with blonde hair and green eyes looks surprised as an unseen person says they have something to show her. A red-haired man reveals he has brought all her books from her old estate, plus new ones, to a grand library, asking if she likes the surprise. Her attention is drawn to a suitcase on a chair, from which a golden light begins to glow. Staring in shock, she realizes the brilliant light is coming from a book. She recognizes the source of the glow, exclaiming that the light is coming from the book. Surveying the massive study, she marvels at the familiar books mixed with new ones, as the red-haired man tells her his office is next door. He smiles gently, inviting her to come to the study whenever she wants. Pulling out a chair for her, he expresses concern over her pale complexion, while she internally panics, wanting only to look at the book. They sit together at a long table in the study, with maids standing by in the background. She asks him if he isn't leaving, and he responds with a questioning yes. Against a cute background, a blushing Rihan reminds Edelise that she once said she wanted to be with him, which she nervously confirms. Flustered, Edelise quickly clarifies that while she's happy to see him, she still feels unfamiliar with the Imperial Palace. Looking earnest, she confesses that she was very worried that something might have happened to him. He looks on, touched, as she continues, saying he was the person closest to her. She tries to explain her distant behavior, citing the shock of suddenly becoming Empress and him the Emperor. Leaning in close, Rihan smiles warmly and asks if she was worried about him. After she stammers a denial, he pulls her into his arms, admitting he's been thinking about what she said long ago. He lifts her hand to his lips, revealing that he had often thought about what it would be like if they got married. She recalls a past moment where she'd asked if they would marry, a memory that now seems impossible to her. A blush creeps onto her face as she realizes he held onto her words for all this time. He holds her hands gently, calling her name and telling her he wants to ask her something directly. Just as he leans in closer, their intimate moment is shattered by a voice calling for, "Your Majesty." The interruption is clarified. The Imperial Knight Commander has arrived with a report. After telling the knight to wait, Rihan tells Idalise he'll see her later and departs. Once alone, Idalise clutches her chest, sighing that she thought she would die from nervousness. Believing the future must have changed, she opens the magical book, hoping it will show her a happy outcome. The vision that appears is dark and ominous, showing a man's terrified face as someone calls for the Empress. In the vision, Rihan coldly tells her to admit her crime now for the sake of her dignity. He stares down at her with a grim expression, promising to spare her extreme punishment if she confesses. Idalise is horrified, wondering why Rihan is a tyrant, as the vision confirms her worst fears about his true nature. A past gentle memory of Rihan holding her flashes by as she realizes her belief that he wouldn't change for the worse was a terrible mistake. Gripping the book, she acknowledges that the grim future is not yet set in stone. With newfound resolve, she clenches her fist, determined to prevent Rihan from becoming a tyrant. The scene shifts to another woman, this one with pink hair, who asks Idalise what she means. A vision of her future self appears, and while she recognizes herself, she feigns ignorance to the other woman. The vision continues with Rihan presenting a document, accusing her of commissioning the Assassin's Guild on a specific date. He presses her for a confession, but she firmly denies the accusation, insisting she never did such a thing. The vision's Idalise appears trapped, surrounded by swirling documents that seem to prove her guilt. Furious, her future self demands to know if Rihan is casting her aside for a woman of unknown status. Rihan casually dismisses the attempted murder of a saint as if it were not a problem. His expression darkens as he looms over her, revealing her true crime was supplying weapons to a rival kingdom, which he declares crossed the line. From the side, a woman with short brown hair steps forward to plead with his majesty. The brown-haired woman, the saintess, tearfully begs Rihan to forgive the empress. Rihan comforts the saintess, who says she doesn't mind the assassination attempt, but he declares that treason is a sin that cannot be so easily forgiven. Back in the present, Idalise trembles in terror, stammering as she watches the horrifying future unfold. The vision's Idalise cries that she wouldn't have been so miserable if he'd shown her any affection, but he coldly asks if she wasn't prepared for this. As guards seize her, Idalise screams for Rihan, who orders her to be confined to the detached palace. Rihan walks away with the saintess in his arms, ignoring Idalise's desperate cries that he can't do this to her. As they leave, the saintess looks back over her shoulder, a sinister and triumphant smirk on her face. Idalise's eye widens in absolute horror as the saintess's betrayal becomes terrifyingly clear. With a sudden thud, the magical book falls closed. Suddenly collapsing, Idalise is caught by a panicked Surfacis, who rushes to her side, asking if she's alright. Worried, Surfacis asks if she's feeling unwell, but Idalise insists she's fine, just a little dizzy. After a moment of silence, Surfacis reluctantly accepts her answer and turns away. Alone now, Idalise sighs, unable to stop the trembling that has taken over her body. A vision of Rihan appears, vowing to harden his heart even if his worst nightmares came true. Idalise gasps for air, terrified by the vision of Rihan's future as a tyrant, a reality she expected but still dreads. Stealing her resolve, she reminds herself that she can still change this outcome, as the future isn't yet set in stone. A faint glow from the book catches her eye, making her wonder if there is more to the story. The book shows another vision, her future self screaming defiantly as she is forcibly seized by guards. The guards tell her resistance is futile, while the saintess watches silently from the sidelines. Idalise recognizes the scene in the vision as the moment her future self is dragged away. But then a new figure appears in the vision's Surfacis, who firmly orders the guards to release her. Stunned, Idalise recognizes him in the vision as he continues to stand up for her. He promises his empress that he will get her out soon, asking her to hold on a little longer. Facing the guards who hold her, Surfacis repeats his promise to rescue her majesty. As her future self denies the absurd accusations, Surfacis reassures her that he knows she's innocent. Back in the present, Idalise is stunned, realizing Surfacis was the only person on her side and questioning their future relationship. She decides to check the book for changes and, to her surprise, discovers a new passage has appeared. The book reveals a character profile, confirming that Kirhan Laxid Kronat Rehan is the story's male lead. It states he marries her for politics, but she melts his frozen heart, leaving Idalise to question who is truly cold. She scoffs internally, thinking that if his heart is frozen, hers must be an entire glacier. She theorizes his heart turns cold because her future self attempts to assassinate the saintess and colludes with an enemy. A memory of the saintess's duplicitous words echoes, where she claims to forgive the empress's assassination attempt. Recalling a cut-off line from the book, she realizes she once considered that someone else might be the main character. She deduces the Saintess is the true female lead, but is deeply unsettled by the memory of her sinister smile. Pondering at her desk, she questions if she misinterpreted the Saintess's expression in the vision. She realizes the events, the assassination plot, and treason must happen soon, as she and Rihan looked no older in the vision. Contemplating the vision, she questions what could possibly drive her future self to such desperate actions. She recalls her future self's desperate plea for affection, wondering if jealousy over the Saintess was the cause. A sudden realization makes her flinch. She concludes that to save herself and prevent his tyranny, she must simply avoid falling in love with Rihan. With this new plan, she feels a wave of relief that their wedding ceremony hasn't happened yet. A gentle memory of Rihan smiling surfaces, his words echoing her own thoughts of relief. Despite her resolve, a tear escapes as she admits to herself that her heart aches at the thought. Pushing the feeling aside, she resolves to avoid a love triangle, reminding herself that her life is what's most precious. She notices the character list in the book has an empty space, suggesting another key figure is yet to be revealed. Her thoughts drift to Surfacis, remembering him from the vision as the only person who was kind to her. Clutching the book, she hardens her expression, determined to uncover more about the future. She's startled as Rihan suddenly appears, apologizing for his lateness and asking if she's been waiting long. As he calls her name, she panics internally, telling herself to get a grip and act normal despite her nervousness. He gently cups her cheek, his expression concerned, as he asks if she has been crying. He points out the redness in her eyes and gently asks if something is troubling her that she feels she can't share. She deflects, claiming she's just feeling homesick after being reminded of the past by the library. He looks at her for a long moment before simply responding that he understands. Now walking through a garden, he says he's glad the library is near his office so they can take walks together. Lost in thought, she looks at him questioningly. Amidst a bloom of white flowers, he offers her a gift, asking her to please accept it. He kneels before her in the garden, holding up a small box in a classic proposal gesture. With the ring on her finger, she looks at him with a pained smile, thanking him but rejecting his proposal and vowing to find a way to divorce him. The red-haired man asks the blonde woman if they should head back inside now. A gentle breeze rustles as the red-haired man gazes forward with a thoughtful expression. She believes escaping is impossible, as there's no way she could get past the Imperial Knights. Tappa's hand gently takes hers. As they walk through a vibrant garden, he tells her there is something he wishes to discuss. Holding her hand, he asks what she thinks it would be like to be married to him. He steps closer, promising he wants to fill her world with only good things. Embracing her from behind, he adds that he would also like to have sons and daughters. She turns in shock, exclaiming at the sudden mention of children, and he asks if it isn't normal to think of that when marrying. Flustered, she agrees that it is, but admits his comment caught her completely by surprise. She grabs his vest and says no, leaving her chibi self wondering what she means. Looking over his shoulder, she confesses how sad she was to have let him go, then asks him to release her now. He holds her tighter, refusing to let go until she feels at ease. He vows to do his best to make her comfortable with her new life so she can think of the palace as her home. As she hugs him, Annalise thinks that his tenderness only makes her cling to false hope. She wonders if he will truly come to love her, and if that love will remain even when the Saintess appears. The scene transitions to the Grand Palace on a bright and sunny morning. A maid informs Annalise that the head chamberlain's business is urgent, and she asks Rihan what's happening. Rihan presents a line of uniformed men, explaining they are knight candidates who will serve as her escorts. Annalise is startled to see a familiar silver-haired knight, thinking her luck has turned around. Rihan explains that she will select 3 of the knights to guard her in rotating shifts. With a reassuring smile, she tells Rihan it's fine and that he must be busy, but he looks concerned. She asks if she can choose her own guards, and upon his approval, she immediately calls for Surfacis. Standing beside the silver-haired knight, she smiles, thinking his familiar face is a comfort. A flash of a snarling red beast appears as a narrator forewarns of the trouble her choice will later bring. Rihan suggests there are other knights besides Berman, but Annalise cheekily passes the decision to him, saying anyone but Surfacis is fine. Rihan reluctantly agrees, regretting sending Berman, as Annalise asks Surfacis how he feels about being her guard. The silver-haired knight, Berman Fasis, says it is his greatest honor, though his expression seems to tense for a moment. Rihan places a hand on Annalise's shoulder, telling her there's no need for a guard while he's with her, and dismissing the rest. As the knights depart, Annalise wonders why he bothered assigning guards just to send them away. He leads her by the hand down a grand hall, promising to take her somewhere she'll like. With a charming smile, he leans in and tells her their destination is a secret. The scene focuses on her elegant shoes as she follows him. She notices guards stationed along every hallway, growing more curious about where he's taking her. He stops before a magnificent golden door, asking her to step back as she wonders what's inside. Her eyes widen in utter disbelief as the doors open to reveal the room's contents. She realizes with a gasp that he has brought her to the Imperial Treasury. Rihan asks if she likes it, then stuns her by declaring that everything inside is hers. Shocked that all of it is for her, he confirms that she may take anything she wants. Muttering, "Wow!" she scoops up a handful of glittering, priceless gems from an open chest. She beams with delight, remarking that she has never seen such rare and beautiful gems before. He smiles, pleased that she's so happy, and she asks how he knew she would like this. A flashback shows a younger Annalise admiring jewels, as Rihan reminds her she has always collected them. She holds a pink diamond, privately thinking it will make a fine divorce settlement someday. Rihan looks on with a warm, gentle smile. Looking at his kind expression, she nervously dismisses a fleeting thought that something seems odd. He gives her the key to the treasury, and she throws her arms around him in a grateful hug. He holds her close, asking if a simple thanks is all he gets for giving her the key to the Empire's greatest treasure. Leaning down, he gently kisses her on the forehead as light streams in around them. Leaning close, the red-haired man teasingly asks a blushing Adalise if she doesn't know what he wants her to do. Startled, Adalise pushes against his chest as he moves in for a kiss. He asks why she isn't acting if she truly knows what he wants, prompting her to quickly insist that she does. Her expression shifts as she realizes with a dawning horror that she's supposed to kiss him. She recalls the memory of Rihan gently kissing her forehead before they parted ways. Flustered in the present, she panics internally, wondering if she should really go through with it. As a way out, she reminds him they aren't married yet, and he seems to stop in his tracks. Leaning in close again, he whispers that he's been putting quite a few things off until after their wedding. He tells her to prepare herself for what he has planned for later. As they stand in a grand hall, Rihan casually announces that foreign delegations will arrive next week to attend their wedding. Idalise processes his words, thinking that delegations typically only arrive a week before the event. With a pleasant smile, Rihan confirms her fears. The wedding will take place in just 2 weeks. Panicking that she doesn't even have a dress, Idalise is assured by Rihan that he has assigned maids to handle all the preparations. He explains that he has already secured the Empire's best designer and bought all the necessary jewels and decorations from auctions. Taking her hand, he tells her not to worry, as she realizes he had everything prepared long before her arrival. He leads her toward a set of golden doors, explaining that they're heading to her room where the maids are waiting. While Rihan smiles contentedly, an aura of pure rage emanates from a furious Idalise. Seething, she recalls her bold plan to get a divorce in 2 weeks, a plan now ruined by the rushed wedding. The day becomes a whirlwind of measurements and choosing dress designs, leaving her utterly exhausted by nightfall. Surrounded by stacks of documents, Idalise sighs, but resolves to pull herself together and get to work. She studies a map, realizing that getting to know the foreign delegations in advance could help if she needs to escape across the border. Surface stands nearby as Idalise smiles, thinking she needs to get close to him as part of her busy plans. The silver-haired knight presents her with a memo just sent by the Chancellor. Reading the note, she learns Count Rudolton's engagement was broken off and decides it's a topic she should avoid. A sudden idea strikes her, causing her to gasp aloud and wonder why she didn't think of it before. She turns to Surface, asking if he knows why the Count broke his engagement, hoping his method will be helpful for her own plans. Surface explains it was due to a conflict between the families, a solution she finds useless since any conflict with her would be treason. At his desk piled high with documents, Rihan asks who's at his door, and an off-screen voice announces itself. Opening the doors, Rihan is surprised to find Idalise, who asks if they can talk for a moment. He asks if something is wrong, and she looks away, admitting she isn't quite sure how to answer. She launches her first attempt at a divorce, Operation Incompetent Empress, determined to make him lose interest in her. Thinking her plan to act incompetent is perfect, her thoughts are cut short when Rihan flatly tells her, "Don't do it." He explains that he and the officials can continue handling the Empire's affairs, but she insists it's the Empress's job. Putting on a concerned act, she asks if people will criticize her, but Rihan dismisses the thought, asking who would dare. He embraces her gently, telling her his wife doesn't need to do such things, and she realizes her plan has already failed. Changing tactics, Idalise calls Rihan's name and tells him there's something she wants. She cheerfully begins her second attempt, luxury, and pleasure by excitedly asking for a beautiful, rare necklace called the Mermaid's Tear. With a sly look, she thinks that by shirking her duties and indulging in luxury, he's sure to lose interest in her. Rihan asks if she truly wanted the Mermaid's Tear, and she confirms, noting its record-high auction price. She immediately worries she's gone too far by asking for the most expensive item she could think of. Rihan nonchalantly remarks that the jewel looked ordinary, prompting a surprised Idalise to ask if he's seen it. Pointing towards her room, he casually asks if the necklace isn't already in her drawer, leaving her completely stunned. Before her lies the magnificent Mermaid's Tear necklace, and she stares in disbelief, wondering how it got there. Rihan offers to help her put it on, and she nervously agrees, feeling it would be strange to refuse after asking for it. As he fastens the clasp, she blushes, flustered by his closeness and the strange feeling it gives her. As he finishes putting the necklace on her, she laments not having a handmaiden do it instead. Looking at the reflection in the mirror, he asks if she likes it, and she stands silently, slightly taken aback. He leans down and places a soft kiss on her shoulder. Completely flustered, she asks what that was for, and he smiles, apologizing and claiming he did it without thinking. As he leaves, Idalise vows to be careful for the next 2 weeks, then suddenly realizes the significance of that time frame. Rihan gently holds her hand, smiling as he promises that he won't hold back anymore. Flustered by his charm, she worries that if this continues, she might genuinely fall in love with him. In a sunlit garden, she finds her resolve and tells Rihan she has something serious to say. She cannot become the Empress. Misunderstanding her, Rihan offers her a red rose, reminding her she doesn't have to handle Empress duties and complimenting her, but she insists that's not what she means. He asks if there's another problem, promising he can solve anything, but she thinks to herself that this is one thing he cannot fix. Clutching the rose to her chest, Idalise launches her next plan by confessing that she already has someone she likes. Rihan's smile vanishes as he repeats her words, and before she can explain further, he cuts her off, demanding to know who it is. A dangerous aura surrounds Rihan as his expression darkens, and Idalise recognizes it as the fearsome look of the tyrant emperor from the book. Speaking in a surprisingly calm tone, he clarifies that he isn't trying to blame her for anything. He leans in, voice slow but insistent, and asks again who it is, causing her to panic as she scrambles to invent a name on the spot. Under pressure, she blurts out the first name that comes to mind: Mr. Luther Weiss, the eldest son of the Weiss Viscount family. Rihan's expression shifts to surprise as he recalls the name, asking if he's the one who asked her to dance 7 years ago, shocking Idalise that he remembers. A flashback shows a younger Idalise being approached by a young man, as she thinks she never expected Rihan to remember something from so long ago. He points out that she never actually danced with the man, but she quickly lies, claiming their feelings for each other grew as they talked. With her story told, she repeats her plea, insisting that she cannot become the Empress. Idalise desperately begs him to break off their engagement, but Rihan's expression hardens as he declares that is the one thing he can absolutely never do. Turning his back on her, he coldly refuses to hear any more and tells her to return to her room for the night. Clutching the rose, Idalise steals her resolve, telling herself not to let her heart weaken. Alone in the garden, she reaffirms her decision, believing that when the Saintess eventually arrives, Rihan will be grateful for what she's done. The scene transitions to a bright view of the palace on the following day. In his office, Rihan dismisses an aide, who quickly and nervously takes his leave. As the aide walks past a confused Idalise, Rihan calls her name from his desk, his tone serious. He confronts her directly, his voice sharp as he asks why she lied to him, leaving her stunned and speechless. A text panel reveals the truth. Weiss Luther is not the eldest son and did not inherit the Viscount title 4 years prior. In a tense close-up, Rihan reveals the man she saw was actually Weiss Luther. Rihan explains that the man she met was Weiss Luther. Her eyes widen in utter shock as she internally screams, questioning if it was really Weiss Luther all along. Rihan explains he found it strange she had no contact with the man after the ball and questions why she would ask him to ruin someone's life, while Idalise looks away with a faint smile. He softens his tone, asking if her reluctance is simply because the role of Empress is too much for her. Pulling her into a tender hug, he admits that he keeps getting greedy and will wait as long as it takes, because he only wants her. Held in his arms, Idalise tells herself that she's not a great person, and that others, like the story's female lead, are far better. As they embrace, Rihan holds her tighter, whispering that for him, there is no one better. The scene transitions to a placid view of the palace gardens, and a greenhouse. Back at her desk surrounded by papers, Idali sighs, admitting she messed up and even felt bad enough to pat his back comfortingly. With a determined look, she realizes the wedding is imminent and decides she must use the last resort she's been putting off. Gulp. As Surfacis stands guard behind her, Idalise braces herself, thinking this will truly be her final attempt. She approaches Rehan at his desk, mustering her courage as she notes how down he's been since yesterday. He looks up from his work and asks what she's doing, to which she replies that she was also working. He asks if he may work in her office, and she hastily agrees with a flustered smile. Her new plan is revealed. She read an article stating that if you obsess over a lover who is already obsessed with you, they will eventually break up with you. With a confident smirk, she decides that this method will allow her to get what she wants without any guilt. Rehan asks what she's reading, and after she explains their customs documents, she eagerly asks to see them too. He obliges, handing her a document from the stack. While reviewing the papers, she notices something odd and asks aloud if the numbers are wrong, catching his attention. Sitting beside him, she points out a specific error, and upon checking, he confirms it and finds other discrepancies as well. Rehan summons an aide, instructing him to inform the customs chief that the Empress herself found errors in the documents, and they must be rechecked, which horrifies Idalise. As Rehan smiles, pleased with her work, she panics, thinking she couldn't just ignore a mistake and must now try a different method. A maid arrives with a cart of refreshments, and Idalise's eyes light up as she realizes this is her chance. She takes a deep breath to steel herself, thinking that any embarrassment will be temporary if it means she can extend her lifespan. Continuing her act, Idalise points at a maid and possessively asks Rehan who the woman is and what their relationship is. She internally apologizes to the maid, telling herself she has to do this if she wants to live. Looking irritated, Rehan states he dislikes it even if she's a maid, prompting Idalise to ask if the same rule applies to knights. Dismissing the bewildered maid, Idalise inwardly promises to give her a bonus later. Rehan questions her decision, asking what will happen to the existing maids and their work. When he turns the question on her, asking if she will do their work instead, she's left confused. A steamy vision flashes through her mind of a shirtless Rehan running a hand through his damp red hair. Mortified at the thought, she covers her mouth and declares that's impossible. Rehan smiles, teasingly asking what she was thinking and pointing out her blush, which she quickly denies. She turns her head away with a flustered pout, unable to look at him. With a sly grin, he adjusts his collar and asks provocatively if she wants to see. Completely flustered, Idalise blushes intensely, her heart pounding. She impulsively grabs his collar, demanding to know what he's doing. He calmly suggests letting the maids handle it since she's fine with another woman doing it. Realizing her plan is backfiring, she thinks it's not working out, just as Rehan says her name. He asks if she likes him now, observing that she's become interested and curious, reacting just like he does. Looking conflicted, Idalise quietly admits that she doesn't know. He asks if she dislikes his obsessive nature, then smiles and declares that he loves it. As he leans closer, she begs him to obsess over her more, all while secretly wishing he would just hate her already. Internally, she asks if he'll be fine if she's annoying and interferes with his work. He challenges her to try, confident she can't be. Staring with fiery determination, she fumes at the thought that he's looking forward to her attempts. She impatiently shoves a document at Rehan, telling him to take it, and he complies. She smirks, convinced her super annoying behavior will work, recalling how a puppy she raised used to act just like this. While she continues poking and humming, he closes his eyes, seemingly clenching his jaw in frustration. Looking down at her with an intense gaze, Rehan loosens his cravat and warns her not to test him any further. A promotional panel appears, briefly interrupting the scene for a recruitment announcement. Pinning her to the sofa, Rehan accuses her of testing his patience, but she stammers in denial. He clarifies that she's always testing him and asks if she really thinks he just means she's annoying. He tells her he wouldn't find her annoying even in 200 years, causing her to think she won't even be alive in 2. The narration reminds her that only about 10 days remain until the wedding. He gently kisses a lock of her hair, whispering his hope that the next 10 days pass safely. The scene transitions to a peaceful garden terrace, set with a teapot and cups. Now in a green dress, Idalise despairs, holding her head in her hands as she realizes she's doomed with the wedding only a week away. She desperately wonders why he isn't getting tired of her and questions if her approach was wrong. A sudden, horrifying thought strikes her. What if she's more charming than she realized? A caption notes this is completely wrong. Turning to her guard, she asks Surfacis a question, and he readily agrees to answer. She encourages him to be honest, but he nervously insists he could never judge her. He hesitantly suggests she's easy to serve, trailing off as she presses for more. Panicked by her intense stare, Surfacis asks if she's trying to kill him, leaving her completely baffled. He thinks to himself that his head would have rolled if the Emperor saw them, while she dismisses his fears. The sound of footsteps catches her attention as a maid approaches, and she once again wonders if she's truly that charming. As the maid arrives, Idalise looks up and asks if she's here already. The maid's report about a change in wedding officiants sparks a bad feeling in Idalise, who suspects a major issue is behind it. A close-up shows her footsteps as she walks with purpose. The maid clarifies that a young female cleric has replaced the priest, an unprecedented and strange occurrence. Idalise's expression turns serious as she realizes this new cleric might be the saint from the book. A new hope sparks within her. If she can catch Rihan with the saint, she might finally have a valid reason to demand a divorce. Idalise looks on in wide-eyed shock as the new cleric makes her entrance. As the brown-haired cleric kisses Rihan's hand, Idalise internally questions why she's doing that already. She tries to calm herself, thinking it's natural for the male and female leads to fall in love, which is exactly what she needs for her divorce plan. The cleric smiles up at a furious Rihan, who internally fumes, "What the hell?" Rihan glares down, his mind racing as he angrily questions what the cleric is doing. Confused, Idalise wonders why they aren't falling for each other, just as the cleric apologizes for forgetting to mention something. The cleric smiles, explaining that her action is an old custom in the Holy Empire. After the cleric explains that kissing the back of a hand shows respect, Rihan furiously confronts her, asking if the Holy Empire makes a habit of doing things that could be misunderstood right in front of his wife. Startled by his aggressive tone, Idalise cries out for him to wait. She quickly steps between them, placing a hand on his back and urging him not to be so harsh and embarrass the cleric. With a strained smile, she reminds Rihan that they are official envoys and warns him against causing a diplomatic rift. Rihan turns and kisses her gloved hand, prompting a flustered Idalise to ask if his gesture was also a show of respect. He gives her a knowing, smug smile in response. The cleric stands by silently, observing the exchange. Rihan asks the cleric if she has anything else to say, but before she can answer, Idalise quickly says no for her. He then dismisses the cleric to rest. As the cleric departs, Rihan turns his attention to Idalise, calling her name. She quickly reassures him that she's fine and doesn't mind, saying everything has been cleared up. He playfully reminds her that she previously claimed to dislike seeing him with other women, and asks if she's fine with the cleric just because she's a woman too. Idalise says no, clarifying that she doesn't want to get close to the cleric, and Rihan asks why. Pulling her into a warm embrace, he tells her he simply doesn't want to make his wife worry. Held in his arms, Idalise panics, realizing her survival plan depended on the two of them falling in love as the story dictated. She recalls the scene, noting that while the saint seemed interested in Rihan, he clearly wasn't interested in her at all. A brief, quiet moment passes as she looks down. Peeking over his shoulder, her eyes are wide with a mix of surprise and uncertainty. Suddenly flustered, she pushes him away and makes a hasty excuse about leaving something in the study. Safely behind the closed study door, she lets out a heavy sigh of relief. She clutches her head in frustration, reminding herself that she only has one life and refuses to die over a romance drama. Fired up, she reaffirms her commitment to achieving a divorce. In the study, she notices the book on the shelf is glowing again, and wonders if it's because the heroine has arrived. Reaching for the glowing book, she desperately hopes it will finally show her something that works in her favor. The scene transitions to a bright, vibrant garden party. A vision from the book shows unfamiliar guests at the party. The vision shifts to a silhouette of a bride and groom, and she realizes she's seeing her own wedding. In the vision, her future self looks radiantly happy in a wedding dress. But the vision quickly darkens, showing Rihan with a cold and severe expression. Holding the open book, Idalise wonders why he looks so cold, like a man being forced into marriage. Knowing the wedding is only a week away, she searches for another clue, certain she hasn't done anything to upset him yet. Her eyes land on a different guest in the vision, Sir Berman Fassis. Sudden realization strikes her as she pauses. The vision focuses on Sir Fassis, who looks incredibly grim during the wedding ceremony. She wonders why he would look so gloomy at her wedding and resolves to find out more about the mystery. Looking up from her book, she sees the Saintess in the garden, flanked by two priests. Observing the Saintess's gentle expression, Idalise is certain that she has feelings for Rihan. A character profile appears, formally identifying the Saintess as Elaine Reynard. Edelise reads about Elaine's past. After a difficult childhood, she awakened as a saintess, met the Emperor, and became the Empress, gaining both love and power, prompting Edelise to admit her jealousy. A splash of blood appears as the narration contrasts Elaine's fortune with the fate of others who lose everything, even their families. The story concludes that while some suffer, others like Elaine gain everything and live happily ever after. Closing the book with a firm tap, Edelise tells herself not to get hung up on it, as it has nothing to do with her. Clutching the book to her chest, she reaffirms her one true goal: to survive. The scene shifts to the next day, with Edelise sipping tea. A pink-haired knight named Perrin, identified as Edelise's second escort knight, answers her call with a sharp grin. Holding a document, Edelise decides her first step is to get closer to Sir Phasis and discover why he looks so upset in her vision. Sir Perrin tells her they can visit the knights right now, and a startled Edelise questions if it's okay to go without notice. He smirks, dismissing her concern by saying their surprise isn't his problem, prompting her to think he has a bad temper. The scene shifts to an outdoor training ground where two knights are sparring with wooden swords. With a soft whew, a weary Sir Phasis catches his breath in a sunlit garden. Arriving at the training grounds, Edelise calls out to Sir Phasis, startling him and another knight with her sudden appearance. As the knights bow in greeting, she tells them to continue their training without minding her. A knight informs her the captain is off duty, but she cheerfully replies that she's just there to look around. Sir Perrin leans in, suggesting she watch the knights spar, but she wonders if their training is finished. He explains sparring is part of training, and noticing his enthusiasm, she agrees to watch for a bit. Sir Perrin calls for sparring volunteers, and several knights eagerly raise their hands for a chance to impress the Empress. The first match is announced as Perrin versus Katznell, and a knight steps forward into the ring. Their wooden swords connect in a powerful clash. Edelise watches the spar with a slightly concerned expression. Sir Perrin rests his training sword on his shoulder with a confident smirk. Watching from the side, Edelise observes that Sir Perrin is surprisingly skilled when he's serious. As Sir Phasis steps up with his wooden sword, Edelise's eyes sparkle as she excitedly cheers for him. Sir Phasis gives her a gentle, appreciative smile after his turn. He remarks to another knight that it's been a while, but sparring is more fun than ever. Edelise recalls a memory of a much more serious match she once witnessed in a grand arena. Lost in thought about how someone was badly injured then, she's pulled from her reverie by a voice asking what she's thinking about. Startled, she accidentally blurts out that watching the sparring made her think of Ron, only to realize with horror that Rahan himself is there. As a knight bows to the newly arrived emperor, Edelise wonders how the busy Rihan found time to visit the training hall. Rihan smiles, telling her he's glad she was thinking of him, before asking what she's doing there. He explains he heard his precious wife was with a group of men and came because he was worried. Edelise quickly clarifies that she asked Sir Perrin for a tour. Rihan teasingly reminds her that she claimed to dislike him being with other women, as a flustered Edelise insists it's fine. Overhearing whispers about her informal use of his name, Edelise grows more flustered as the knights note how close they must be. Rihan gently reminds her not to use formal speech with him in public, while she tries to deflect, saying she doesn't mind him being with other women. He sternly declares that he minds seeing her with all these men, stating that even one would bother him, which surprises her. Trying to lighten the mood, Edelise brightly praises the knights as strong and cool, making them blush with pride. The knights gasp as Rihan's expression darkens. He pulls her close and mentions the sword, leaving her confused. Gripping a wooden sword, he declares that if his knights are so strong, he should experience their skill for himself. With a challenging gaze, he wonders aloud how cool they truly are, causing Edelise to suspect he's jealous. In the center of the training yard, Rihan asks for volunteers, but the crowd of knights remains silent and hesitant. Frustrated by the lack of volunteers, Rihan is about to act when Sir Phasis steps forward, offering to do it. Edelise looks on, shocked that Sir Phasis has volunteered to spar with the Emperor. She expresses her concern, but Sir Phasis assures her it's fine, viewing it as a rare honor to spar with His Majesty. Rihan's expression sours as he accuses Edelise of caring more about Burman Phasis than him, a claim she hastily denies. As he questions her sincerity, she insists he shouldn't spar, telling him she already knows he's strong. Looking at him with genuine concern, she admits that she's worried he'll get hurt. She takes his wrist, firmly telling him that it's too dangerous. A hint of a blush appears on Rihan's face as he smiles warmly at her concern. Moved by his reaction, she softly says his name. Sir Phasis stands by quietly, watching the couple's exchange. Rihan sets the rules for a new match, stating it's over if a participant leaves the ring, collapses, or is incapacitated. He directly addresses Berman Fasis, telling him not to hold back and that he won't be held responsible for what happens. Facing Fasis, Sir Perrin grins wickedly and raises the stakes, suggesting they use real swords instead. Rihan's lips curl into a sinister smile, clearly intrigued by the dangerous proposal. Horrified by the sudden escalation, Adelise lets out a silent, wide-eyed scream of protest.